the floor here for this webinar, and what we're exploring is kind of an open dialogue around creating low code and no code voice workflows in an effort to create a more efficient, or the most efficient in your realm, and personalized customer experience possible. So presented to you by 3C Logic and ServiceNow. So super excited to be here with you today. Really quick standard safe harbor state disclosure that basically states that this might contain forward-looking statements and should be, you shouldn't be making any market decisions or anything else regarding our companies based on our opinions of things today. Let's start with a quick introduction. I'm Coulter Hammer, and I've been working in product management here at ServiceNow for a little under 3 years. And I've spent a good majority of my career, about 15 years or more, in contact center and the CRM space before coming over to ServiceNow. And here with me is Guillaume, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey guys, Guillaume from 3C Logic. I run our alliances program. Of course, as part of that, our strategic relationship with ServiceNow. Of course, we at 3C Logic, we specialize in voice enablement technologies. And what we'll be covering today is how you can apply that in a very efficient way, complementary way to ServiceNow. So looking forward to today's discussion.
Yeah, thanks, G. Guillaume, G, I call him G sometimes, so that's G or Guillaume. Guillaume is his real name. So let's get some context really for today's discussion. As we know, surveys sometimes give us a skewed view of reality if they're done incorrectly. So this survey that actually Guillaume sent me recently when we were doing some prep work for this either reflects reality, or it does a really good job of kind of doubling down or hardening my own confirmation bias, because this is something I believe in very heavily. So these numbers are fairly big. 75% of surveyed individuals in this survey crave what we consider the human touch, essentially asking for human-like experiences regardless of the channel being live or being a digital channel in and of itself. It's not really today, and one of the things that we're going to proffer is that right out of the gate, this might be a little bit controversial for some, but we're promoting this idea of kind of data-backed facts that while digital channels are increasing in popularity and adoption, digital channels, voice plus digital, is still where the market lives. And so it's not a matter of one or the other today. It's not a matter of us choosing between these and saying, hey, voice is going away. We've heard that a bunch of times, right? So that's kind of one of the things we want to debunk a little bit today. But creating that human touch is more of a holistic approach that includes each of those channels and the escalation paths and workflows that make it easier for people to do their work. So you kind of had some opinions about that as well that we were talking about, I think would be important to talk about here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I echo what you said, right? I mean, obviously, ServiceNow is if we look at it from that lens, evangelizes the importance of being able to allow customers to be able to address and self-service, whether it's the knowledge portal, chat bots, live agent chat, and so on and so forth. To your point, voice has typically always had a pretty negative, ranking when it comes to how voice as an experience is. I mean, no one really likes to call it an organization. And yet it remains one of the primary channels that individuals tend to defer to. In fact, if done right, which even I found this striking despite my own bias for the channel, regardless of generation, people still prefer to be able to connect with customer service professionals via the phone. I would evangelize that it's more about, to your point, doing digital and voice, having that omni-channel relationship done right. I don't think channels, are the problem. I think channels being improperly woven into the fabric of your workflows and the ones that are operating to get work done in the background is actually where things typically tend to fall apart. And that's why when you call, you feel like you're, it's the first time you've ever, the company has ever gotten to know you, even if you're a long-time customer, or why you're getting transferred from one agent to another, each time having to repeat your life story. Those are opportunities, in my opinion, to really help differentiate your organization and drive better customer experiences. But there's a technological challenge that we're going to talk about today that you can solve between 3C Logic and ServiceNow to make that a little bit easier, make it less of a tech overhaul, if you will, and ultimately deliver a better, more rounded experience, so that if and when people call, that experience is on par with all with the level of digital experiences you built within the ServiceNow platform. And I'll give you a simple example. I saw someone complain recently on social media that they were doing two-way texting with a major airline. They were trying to change a ticket. And apparently in the process, whoever they were texting with must have broken something in the background and had to send them to a new text or SMS text queue, because now you needed technical support to help solve the problem. And as soon as they got into a new queue, the response was, okay, congratulations, you're now in the SMS, technical support queue. Your expected wait time due to high volume is 754 minutes. Right. I don't know about you, but that's just demoralizing. So, I don't think the conversation is digital versus voice. Obviously today we're going to focus on how to apply voice if and when, the digital experiences are, unable to meet maybe more complex requirements. So I think a lot of people will learn just how easy it is to weave that into the ServiceNow structure as a complement to what you've built there.
Yeah, Guillaume and I were joking around about how if you were born in the 80s, you grew up with a bike in your hand. If you were born anytime in the 2000s plus, you were born with a phone in your hand, right? So it's interesting how not only those digital channels that have been built, how important they are and how they've continued to become more and more important in a lot of times in more of the B2C market, right? For consumers picking up and just using actual devices. But what we've seen is I don't know how we thought that voice was going to go away so quickly when we're equipping everybody with the capacity to use voice at any given time. And so it would fall on us as humans to think, hey, if voice is the thing, if voice is something that actually brings us closer to other humans, it brings that connection that we're trying to build with our customers, then it would behoove us to have really good experiences and really good ways to develop those experiences with our actual customer. So, maybe it'd be beneficial, G, to walk through some of the challenges sort of preventing this level of customer experience that we're referring to. So what's kind of getting in the way of creating that consistency?
Well, there's a few of them, right? And we're just maybe hitting on some highlights here. But number one, well over half of consumers, they get frustrated with the fact that some of the systems that are being put in place now make it appear harder to actually get in touch with a live individual. Whether it's a lengthy IVR call flow asking you 50 questions and you're sitting in a queue for 2 hours, the same can be true in digital mediums as well. On the flip side, though, of course, once you reach an individual, some of the frustration stems from the fact that they don't have any context as to the purpose of your call. Right. So there's no intelligence trying to understand, why you might be calling. Is there an opportunity to do, voice self-service to help, deflect the need for you to wait for someone and also reserve those agent resources for more complex inquiries. So that typically is a challenge, and that you'll find is a technological challenge, by and large. And then, you look, most organizations, right, less than a third, even have there's tools and solutions in place to make it seamless for a customer or an agent to be able to transition between channels, right? A lot of conversations will start over a chat or an email and may escalate to a call. But if that context doesn't carry through, either for the agent or the customer or a combination of the two, that also typically creates a very negative overall experience. And we know at the end of the day, the focus here is to maintain good customer experiences, because this is all about retention, right? This is all about keeping your customers. It's a lot easier to switch vendors and solutions today than ever before, which is why everyone is so hyper-focused on employee and customer experiences. Yeah. It's really a case, candidly, Coulter, of trying to get from this situation to what we're going to cover and actually showcase in a demonstration today, which is the idea that even if you're dealing with, let's say, only cloud offerings, right? This isn't a legacy versus cloud problem per se. It still has to do with, siloed systems, channels being offered by different vendors, So as a customer, you're piecing it together. And then of course, data being potentially hosted in a couple different areas. So you look at ServiceNow here in the left-hand column, it already has a lot of the digital channels, right? So digital inquiries are coming in. You've got agents operating in the ServiceNow agent workspace. You've got analytics. You've got workflow management. You've got a fairly complete stack here within ServiceNow. And then you look at the call center side of the house, which again, that typically deals with people calling in literally voice calls. And very often that is a completely separate solution administered by a separate team. And what historically is done, even today, is organizations or the customer themselves will actually use connectors or go through the effort of doing custom integrations between the ServiceNow platform and their call center solution. But it doesn't inherently solve for some of these pain points. So if a caller comes in through the call center and that experience has no access or context for what is otherwise hosted, let's say your customer profile in ServiceNow, then the experience is going to be relatively plain at best, right?
Yeah.
And that in large is the issue. So it's a case of trying to get from this type of experience to something that's a little bit more, well, for today's purposes, ServiceNow-centric, right? So how can you solve for what is not native to the ServiceNow platform? In this case, we're going to focus on voice. You could extend SMS as another channel as a complement that sits side by side with the digital engagement channels that ServiceNow offers, right? So now you have all of your channels, be it digital or voice, actually leveraging the entire ServiceNow stack, right? So the ServiceNow workflows, everything that's known about the incoming caller. You can do your analytics in one place. You can manage your workflows. So you now have a single agent as well as administrative workspace. And the goal then, of course, is can we also make sure that it's not a heavy tech lift when it comes to administering this type of environment, right? Which is the low code, no code discussion we're going to have today, right? So can I easily solve for and create dynamic voice workflows as easy as I create, digital workflows within the ServiceNow platform? And ultimately, the goal here is to have one system of record that really helps streamline and solve for some of the headaches that a siloed, architecture, can't.
Yeah, and I wish that previous slide and this kind of build to what we're trying to get to today was had improved since the 2000s as well. That's one of the things that I've noticed is that this still remains a really strong initiative for a lot of enterprise customers that are looking to drive kind of that data consolidation, those data-driven processes. And then layering on top of that, this is where, and I'll give the shameless plug for ServiceNow, but this is where ServiceNow shines in the capacity for taking some of this, all of these data sources and all these different applications out there and creating seamless workflows across each of those. That's kind of the value prop and the mission of ServiceNow, is to create those workflows in a place to become the platform of platforms, as we call it, and become something that gives customers a way of doing that without having to, like you were talking about, Guillaume, is not going out and having to rip and replace and pull everything out. And we kind of talk about these migration paths, but this is something where we are now in a place where we have the capacity, the tools, and otherwise to create an environment where that exists. And really what we're focusing on today, and I think you'll talk about this next, is really getting into that environment of how do we create those workflows and make them accessible not only to the developer, but make them accessible to business users and to other contact center folks who are running the business processes inside their own contact center. How do we get to that kind of area of expertise without having to really dive into development cycles and everything else?
So I mean, the answer is I mean, obviously a slight oversimplification here for the purposes of today's discussion. And I'm actually going to show this live here in just a short minute. But if you are able to leverage ServiceNow as the primary system of record, right? And maybe ServiceNow is consolidating other data sources, right? But now then the only remaining piece of the equation is how can you make sure that your voice workflows can leverage that information, and to your point, allow the business user, maybe someone that's not technical, create those workflows and those outcomes without having to rely on those IT resources. So what you have here is an example of the 3C logic, what we call the interaction manager, effectively an IVR, an interactive voice response tool. But what it does is, in addition to being completely embedded inside of the ServiceNow portal or environment, it actually makes very effective use of what's called ServiceNow operation handlers. What's a ServiceNow operation handler? It's effectively a repeatable event, repeatable task that you can call upon, whether it's to create an incident, update an incident, fetch the status of an incident, authenticate a user, and it pulls from those different environments. So what it allows you to do is 3C Logic allows you to take advantage of the ServiceNow operational handlers and actually apply them into your call flow. So all of a sudden, the call flow is now querying certain aspects and launching certain, get, pull, or fetch responses between the 3C Logic voice solution and ServiceNow, all of it contained within the ServiceNow environment. So all of a sudden, your call flow is as intelligent or as the information and the workflows that are already pre-templated for you to leverage within ServiceNow. So I can give you a short example of that, right? So what we're going to do here today is actually kind of walk through what a building process would look like, right? So in the spirit of low code, no code, full disclosure, I'm not an engineer. I don't have a technical background yet. I'm going to go ahead and build one for our audience today. And the use case, just to sort of give it a storyline, is let's pretend someone is calling in to report an outage, right? And let's say that outage already is known, in which case there's really no need to transfer them to a live agent. We'd much rather deflect the caller and say, hey, let me create a child event for you. Let me send you an SMS so you can follow the progress of that outage. And let's deflect your call to make room for someone who might be calling about something that is in fact deserving of a live, individual. And at that point, you're effectively servicing both audiences without necessarily impacting the customer experience. So we'll see how you can create a workflow that can identify the outage, that can then create an event in ServiceNow, and then ultimately an outcome. And I'll show you just how easy it is to do. So let me actually switch screens here.
This is super exciting. I love watching this part of it. And when I get to watch partners actually build things that create better experiences for our customers, it becomes something of a pat on the back as a product manager. So take it away.
Well, let's see if you and the audience agree. So I'm obviously in ServiceNow right here. Now, one of the things that distinguishes 3C Logic and really buys in, showcases the fact that when we talk about embedded, quite literally 3C Logic as a solution is actually even available to users within the ServiceNow administrative portal, right? I've already favored it here, so I'm going to pull up the 3C Logic administrative portal, and you can see this is where you can manage your phone numbers, your media announcements. There's analytical capabilities, but today we're going to focus on being able to manage your IVRs, your phone numbers, and so on and so forth. So I'm actually going to go into a pre-existing project, and for our audience, I'm showcasing what is going to be a release later this year. These capabilities are already available, but the ease of use on the low code, no code topic is part of what we are enhancing in our upcoming release for ServiceNow later this calendar year. So I'm going to go into the interaction manager, and the interaction manager, this is where you can build call flows effectively, Coulter, right? Mm-hmm. And when I'm referring to call flows, again, this could be in the capacity of a self-service use case. It could be in the capacity of eventually transferring to a live agent, right? And I'll showcase that, and I'll actually do a live call here in a minute. So I already have a few pre-built ones. We'll go through those, but let's pretend I want to create one from scratch, right? So I'm going to create an outage self-service voice workflow. It doesn't really matter what you call it, right? But just for today's purposes, right? So I'm going to go ahead and create that IVR, right? And then I'm going to go in and actually go into what we call the interaction designer or the builder. And this is where you can start building your call flows once it pops up here.
Yeah, and
we'll give it a second.
And the goal here.
Sorry, yeah, so everything's single sign-on, right? So this is all about roles and permissions, right? So obviously I have administrative rights. This is obviously from the purview of someone that would administer the call center, not necessarily from the agent who is the one that would be the recipient of everything you're building here, right?
Yep.
So you can see what we have here in the left-hand column is an example list of the different components that you can easily use to build your call flow, right? So obviously, someone calls in 1-800 support. This is going to be your start point, right? So the first thing you might want to do is obviously when someone calls is you might want to provide a greeting, right? So I'm going to give this a name, greeting message, give it a description, greeting for incoming callers, right? Let me make sure I type that right. And then what you can do is you can select a prompt. So text to speech is a very common thing. Of course, you could select a pre-existing media file, but I'm going to just do text to speech, which means I can now use pre-existing, well, they're not bots, but whether it's Amazon, Lex and Poly or Google Voices, you can pick just about any voice you want. So I'm going to do English. You have different avatars. So do you want a female to be the voice of your organization? Do you want a male? Is it Kimberly, whatever? So we'll just pick one. And then you can, type whatever it is that you want your greeting to be. So hi, and whoops, let me type this right. Hi, and thank you for calling the customer support team at company X, right? Whatever it is that you want to say, right? And then you can just say you're done. And then you've already established ServiceNow. Now we can do something that's a little bit more interesting, which is, okay, Coulter, you're calling in, right? Maybe I want to first find out who you are, right? So you'll see we have these predetermined ServiceNow, we'll call them action items or action icons, where in this case, I can fetch a record from ServiceNow. So in this case, it could be get user data, right? So this is fetch caller data. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pull from the system user table or sys user table within ServiceNow to fetch information, Coulter, about you, right? And if I want to run that query, I have this saved here. What you can do is you can add a glide record here in the background that's going to pull the information from ServiceNow, right? So here's the glide record that we're pulling, and now I'm fetching get user data from ServiceNow. And then, of course, so we've done a greeting. I can connect these two, and then off we go, right? And then you say, okay, now that I've got the user data, is there an action I should be performing? One of the common things that people will do when people are calling in is they're going to say, yeah, I'd like to create a record. In this case, we might want to create an interaction record. So this can be, I'm going to create an interaction, a ServiceNow interaction. Right, so this is literally create a ServiceNow interaction record. It could be create a ServiceNow incident, create a ServiceNow case. Doesn't really matter. You can determine what the table is here, and then in that interaction, what are we going to post, right? So in this case, what we might want to do is you might want to determine who we're opening this record for. Right. So in the column, we're going to say, who did we open this for? And quite literally, it's going to be the get caller data that we've already fetched in the prior step in the call flow. Right. And then you might say, OK, and what type of record do we want to, what type of interaction record is this? It's going to be a phone interaction. Right. So what we're doing here very quickly, and you can see, it's quite convenient in terms of how we build it. You can start connecting these out to each other, and effectively in what amounted to 60 seconds, a couple minutes, I've already started to create an experience for an incoming caller. And notice this experience, I'm not asking anything of the individual. Maybe I'm using their phone number as the identifier. That allows me to gather their profile. And in using that profile, I can go ahead and create an interaction that's got your first name, last name, whatever are the attributes that are already known about you in ServiceNow. Right. And then, of course, you can continue, through the example. In the interest of, today's webinar, I already have a finished version of this call flow, right? So here's the greeting, here's me fetching the data, here's us creating the interaction in ServiceNow. And then for the purpose of the example, you'll notice that we are doing an outage check inside of ServiceNow. And this is where we go back to the operation handlers that I referred to earlier, right? So there is, with the 3C Logic application, a whole slew of pre-existing operational handlers, ServiceNow operational handlers that we can call. In this example, we are calling out, can you let me know whether or not there is an existing outage that I need to present to this caller, right? So I've identified who you are, I've created an interaction, and then I'm going to prompt you to say, hey, Coulter, we're aware that there's an outage in your area. Is this why you're calling, right? Or is it not? And so then you can, after that, you can get pretty advanced with what do you want the experience to be for the caller, right? For purposes of simplicity, we're going to assume that that's why you're calling, but you can see how easy it is to build these type of low-code voice experiences, again, made easy based on how well it integrates and leverages the ServiceNow platform and some of the ServiceNow capabilities.
Yeah, and Guillaume, I was just going to say there, that little touch right there, I know you brushed past it pretty quickly and talked about it, but if you think about the experience you've had with your internet provider or your phone provider, or your power provider at your home, whatever it is, when those types of outages happen and I call in to let them know that it happens and they know it happened, we talk about this all the time. We talk about it being a proactive approach and all these different things, but very few companies have something as simple as that capacity right there to build it and say, hey, just go out and check and see if there's an outage in the area code of that customer's record inside of ServiceNow. So they pull that customer record, find out where they are, pull over here and find out if there's an actual outage. And then bam, it changes the entire flow of the workflow to say, hey, now we're going to present up to them that, hey, we know about an issue in your area. Is that what you're calling about? Instead of what's your name and what's your zip code and what's your, so instead of having those few steps that you make for a customer create that kind of brand equity that your customers want to give you. But it's also, it creates an environment where it makes it easy for them to give it to you. So that's really
notice as well that because this flow is now leveraging ServiceNow, any changes in the ServiceNow environment to your profile, to the status of the outage is going to dynamically change what your experience or what voice experience you're going to be delivered as a caller. Right. Versus if we go back to sort of one of the challenges, right? If you're administering this type of call flow outside of the ServiceNow environment, right? Every time there's a change, you also have to modify your connections, your adapters, your APIs, whatever your custom hooks are, or it'll be such a pain that you, even though obviously, you're operating in a very dynamic world where things are changing and customers expect real-time updates and responses to when they're interfacing with your organization. So the idea here is to weave this into the ServiceNow workflows side by side with the same operational handlers that you're using for chat and other digital channels within the ServiceNow medium, right? So if we actually took a look at a live example, right? So this is the new ServiceNow San Diego environment. I just so happen to have a ticket or a case here opened up about a Tableau server outage, right? So this already exists. I'm going to open up child cases of which you'll see there's none. And really just to give you an example of what would be the outcome of what we inherently quickly built here, let me just do a quick call in here and take people through it.
Hello, thank you for calling Acme Corp. You have reached the help desk support line. Our system indicates that an outage has been reported. Would you like to hear the latest update?
Yes, please.
We are aware of an issue related to a Tableau server outage. Our engineers are actively addressing the outage, and our team will continue to provide updates as they are available. This outage was first reported yesterday at 8:39 p.m. The current state of the outage is open. Thank you for your patience. Was your call regarding this outage?
Yes, it was.
We have automatically created a case for you and associated it with the major outage case. You will shortly receive an SMS for tracking purposes. You will also receive an email or knowledge article that might help you with your troubleshooting. Would you still like to speak to an agent?
No, thanks.
Thank you for your call. Have a great day. Goodbye.
So obviously in this case, we kept it relatively simple, but you can see how it read the outage, it identified the status, told me what it was, created a child incident, or in this case, a child case to me, sent me an SMS, which I just received in the background. I can follow the progress. I can move about my day. And notice, as this outage or if the information in ServiceNow changes, if I were to call again, my experience may inevitably be different. Maybe next time there is no outage and it would skip that process altogether, right? The other thing that I would stress here is one of the benefits, let me just go to this screen here, is this has the capacity to take on ServiceNow information, whether it's to create a record, fetch one, and so on and so forth. But you can also bring in external bots like a Google Dialogflow, or some of the things that obviously we won't talk about now, but in a future session with you, Coulter, with some of the things that we're working on with ServiceNow. So the idea is that think of an expansion of the concept of using operational handlers. If you've already built certain engines that perform very specific tasks outside of the ServiceNow environment, like Google Dialogflow, you can actually call those bots, feed them whatever they need, get the response back, and then feed that into the workflow here within ServiceNow. So an example would be, if I pull up a bot self-service here, here's an example just for our audience of an example where, you're now doing, you're now pulling information or using natural language understanding, which is obviously a capability within Google Dialogflow, to create a different type of experience, which may be fully automated in self-service, but it's calling external capabilities and can also, of course, make use of internal ServiceNow contextual data about the caller so that you can merge it all together and create relatively advanced voice experiences.
That's fantastic. Yeah, a lot of what 3C Logic is doing and kind of building some of this in here. In delivering on, we talk about in ServiceNow this low code, no code, and the workflows that we have, but it's really exciting. Like I was saying earlier, it's really exciting to watch, our partners and others inside our customers kind of taking advantage of all of the kind of rich feature set that's there that sometimes we just don't know about it, right? Sometimes we just don't know that this is possible, and that it's something that somebody has gone into the effort of building into the application. And 3C does a great job of building that automation into the application, making it easy to get to, and really kind of helps you to breathe easier when you get into the ServiceNow application. So there's definitely some real results that come from this. We would not be good marketing folks or check that box if we didn't give you the final result here. So I personally, I'll take the first one if that's okay, Guillaume. But the first one was really interesting to me because I think this is such a huge force multiplier in the contact center. If I can't deflect a call entirely, my next best option in the contact center is to decrease the handle time of those calls that happen. So, instead of diminishing the consistency inside of the environment, we're just saying, hey, we're going to handle these more efficiently, better inside of the system. And then, the volume might not decrease, but if that handle time decreases, we're still decreasing the total amount of minutes that I'm spending from a cost perspective, from an agent perspective, et cetera. So that cost saving is of increasing how quickly we handle calls, I think, is very important.
Yeah, and arguably in this market, it's going to be a focal point, right? I think depending on people's views on where the market is headed, if there's a recession ahead or anything of that nature, organizations are quickly getting tasked with having to do more with less. So it is about optimizing your resources, both human and technological. Same thing when it comes to automation. Here today we showed how you could deflect someone calling about an outage, right? You don't need 1,000 people calling you about the same thing. Once it's been identified, you want to deflect those remaining 999 people, so you can make room for individuals that still need services different than the outage announcement, and yet still successfully service those 900 plus individuals that were still affected enough to need to call. Those are real, impactful events. Otherwise, you inevitably have backlog So call deflection, escalation response time, and then just, again, reduction in administrative requirements, right? So you mentioned earlier, one of the more powerful things here is enabling the actual business user, the one that's being measured and maybe monitoring or managing these groups on their performance, to be able to do, make these changes in that real time without necessarily having to overly rely on IT resources, which could be expensive or could cost you time in terms of how quickly you can deploy and shift your operating model depending on what's going on. And it's, at that point, that gives you a lot more time to then assess the quality of the engagements. So there's a lot of things with regards to speech analytics and so forth. That's a discussion for a different day. But the goal here is to optimize for the agent. They also want to be successful at their roles. And many will list that, disparate technologies are, part of their headache, right? They're almost having to manually overcome the fact that some of these systems don't play nice. This helps solve for that. And then again, for their supervisors, making their life a lot easier when it comes to administering these types of environments.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Task and case automation is one of the key elements that ServiceNow brings to the table from a value perspective to its customers, and we kind of live and breathe to make that work easier for our customers via kind of those simple, easy workflows. So escalations are expensive, as we know. Any escalation that we have becomes a further expense to the organization. And ultimately, they create a sort of a lag in the dopamine hit that customers get from having their problems resolved, right? So we're looking to give those, instead of them having to go to social media to get that dopamine hit, let's give them that dopamine hit here when they call in to get a problem resolved. And if we can do that, the more the customer is going to keep coming back to you as an organization. The other thing I would say is that classic call deflection on those repetitive items, especially if you can make it a consistent across channels, is huge. We still talk about, and I still have lots of customers who they have a really hard time just implementing some of those basics around call deflection. And so this is, again, another arena where we can get into that more simplistic, easier to access kind of applications that work us through things that create such a significant difference in the way that we treat our customers.
So we have a few questions here. One from Kayla. Kayla, thanks for the question. When deciding to generate case, incident, or interaction in ServiceNow from the IVR, can that be different per flow? Or is this a whole IVR decision to generate one type of ticket? No, it can be. You can build relatively large IVR flows that can lead to a case, an incident, an interaction. So no, it's not limited to one flow. I limited it to one flow, Kayla, just to keep it simple for today's purposes. But no, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can build and what are the events that it can trigger in ServiceNow, right? Whether it's creating something new, updating something existing, for example, closing a ticket, or anything in between. So no, it's not limited to just that one flow. In fact, a lot of our customers, will find that their end users will call with multiple requests, right? Which is one of the reasons interactions as a table is relatively useful before you determine, is this an interaction is going to lead to an event, whether it's a case, an incident, and so forth, or a combination.
Great question.
So for those that don't know much about 3C Logic, just to give you a little bit of a highlight, we've been around for a long time. We're a premier partner. We work very closely with the likes of Coulter and his team. We are, one of the highest listed or better ranked, I think we're the #1 ranked integration application on the ServiceNow store as of today. Everything we do is built on Amazon Web Services with customers all over the world of all walks of industry, whether it's, manufacturing, whether it's healthcare, higher education, finance, retail and things of that nature, because ultimately every organization has a front of the house. It may be more virtual today than it was pre-pandemic, if you will. But everyone it wants to grant the ability to interface with their end users. How you choose to do that or how effectively, that's obviously something we discussed today, which is making sure that voice is not, left to fend for itself on an island when you've done such a good job creating those experiences within the ServiceNow platform at a digital level. So hopefully today we're able to share with you how voice, and I want to stress SMS as well, can be a complement to everything else you've built. And of course, if you have questions, our team and I are always more than happy to field them. You can email us at ServiceNow@3clogic.com. We can have a discussion about what you're doing today and what you might want to wish to do differently, perhaps using or applying some of the things that we covered.
Yeah, say that you broke up a little bit. Say the email address one more time.
It's ServiceNow@3clogic.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Cool. Well, we do have a time for a few questions. If we want to take questions, I'm going to leave it up to our moderator, Paul, to if we still have a few minutes.
I see one question here from Kim. Can you tell me a little bit about how this automation chat functionality can be integrated with the knowledge application in ServiceNow? So again, it's not chat. Chat would be an application that is already native to the ServiceNow platform. Obviously, that's their virtual agent. So I am not an expert in that category, Kim. I will defer to Coulter on all things related to chat. There are different ways that you can integrate it with the ServiceNow knowledge base. Candidly, the best way to answer your question is to understand a little bit more about your specifics, to know exactly what you have in mind. There's a couple different ways you can skin the cat. The beauty of the ServiceNow platform is it's relatively open. So we can access quite a bit of information. So depending on the audience you're trying to serve and the use case you'd like to potentially automate if and when they call, we can talk that through and see, exactly where we might be able to make your life a little bit easier. On the chat topic, though, I'll defer to Coulter.
Yeah. So if you and we can send you more information, Kim. So if you wanted to learn a little bit more about our virtual agent and our what we would consider chatbots, virtual agent and chatbots are kind of synonymous in the industry. We talk about it as virtual agent here at ServiceNow. And virtual agent functionality will allow you to tap into multiple resources that you have internally inside of ServiceNow, including knowledge, including being able to pull from basically any of the tables that you have in ServiceNow to drive the actual responses and answers to questions that happen. So those can be created in what we call our virtual agent designer, and that virtual agent designer allows you to create similar to what you saw today from Guillaume in the call flow designer. It's a similar look and feel where you can pull basically different elements that you want to play back to a customer. Those elements are something that are built around right now. Just it drives the verbiage into a chat window. That chat window then has the option of pulling in other and exposing other links and things like that out to different knowledge articles or other things that they need to see. So all of that's kind of consolidated down into that virtual agent, into what we consider a topic. When that topic comes up, it'll drive them through a virtual agent flow, and ultimately we get to escalation to where if we want to escalate to a live agent or to some other channel, those things are all things that are capabilities that we're enhancing and building into our virtual agent today. So depending on what you're looking to do, that's definitely a possibility that we can have.
I think that's it. I think that's all we have on questions so far, Coulter.
Cool. All the questions. Well, thank you guys so much for joining today. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, Guillaume, and have you as our subject matter expert and our partner. Or maybe this is your webinar and I'm acting like it's mine. That's whatever. I did not mean that in that way. I meant this was great conversation. We're excited to have been here. So I think it's interesting. It's real. It's kind of like real people meets real process meets real technology. I know we talk about people, process, and technology a lot, and when we get into the reality of it, it's the people that create these great products that we have to offer to the market. So we're grateful to all of our engineers and all of the other folks who build out essentially really cool products that make work easier for everybody. And so we're hoping to empower the folks on each of those different levels, from developers that can really dive in, all the way up to a business user who has this no-code, low-code type opportunity to build out different applications. So Paul, I will turn it over to you and let you kind of finish it up here.
Thanks, Coulter. Thanks, Guillaume, as well. And thanks to everybody at 3C Logic for the partnership and alliance that we've built here. Coulter, I think that you nailed it. There's a lot that we're working on in our partnership. There's a lot that's coming. We're really excited to continue to iterate, to continue to better serve our mutual customers. And we're appreciative of everyone who attended the webinar today. So everyone have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Hi,
everybody.
guys.
Bye.
Thanks again.